Thursday edition of Birds 365, joined now by the great Les Bowen. Les, how you doing, man? Welcome to the show on this Thursday.
Great, Zander. Hello, John. How you doing, guys?
Good to see you, Les. Bye week, some bye week angst. Maybe the Phillies can
I
get
is
on a
falling,
run
Les,
here.
at 2-2 in Philly.
Yeah.
You were talking about that Mahomes stat. Yeah, that's Mahomes is off to a very un-Mahomes-like start this season, but he has 3 Super Bowl rings.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean, you just can't start there. That's just not a valid place to start. No.
Well, let's start in a more valid place. I think it is kind of. I can't figure it out. I don't think the Eagles could figure it out. If they could, they would. This turn from what essentially was, let's be honest, the greatest stretch in Eagles history, and they're only 91 years old. If you go from 2-5 in Nick Sirianni's first year to 10-1 in last season, that is the best stretch of Eagles football ever. Yeah. And then it's completely fallen off the table.
Yep.
A large skeleton of the same group, the same team, the same players, the same leaders. If you want to go back to the tremendous leadership of Jason Kelsey and Fletcher Cox and everybody, and all of a sudden they're trailing by 17 points. You want to talk about a stat? That's a stat. We'll give a hat tip to Reuben Frank. 48 games Nick Sirianni coached, they never trailed by 17 or more at halftime. Now it's been like 3 times over the past 10 games. What the heck is going on? It's just this. Everybody's got a shelf life, and this shelf life expired, Les, right in front of our eyes.
It might be. I'm not really willing to say that definitively yet, but it might be. But the defense is really as much troubling as Hurts and the offense is. Looking at Sunday, I mean, you knew the offense was in a little bit of trouble without A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Lane Johnson.
You should have known. I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, they'll just scheme it up, Les."
Right, but defensively, this team is just dissolved into a puddle. I mean, it's and that's what started the roll downhill last year. I think.
Yeah.
I think the whole team collectively realized at a certain point that with this defense, we're certainly not going back to the Super Bowl. And, and I think that kind of deflated the whole balloon and started other problems, like Hurts trying to make plays he shouldn't try to make and yada, 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 But this year, I couldn't be more disappointed. Vic Fangio came up with one good game plan against New Orleans, and that it worked beautifully. And then they had to play nickel last week, and they can't play nickel. They can't play nickel at a high school level. I don't understand this. The secondary is very talented, but they can't cover anybody. On social media, I keep being told that I can't expect Jalen Carter or Jordan Davis to actually do anything or show up in the stats in any way whatsoever. If the quarterback's getting the ball out fast, you can't possibly, make a tackle or
First time ever the quarterback's getting the ball out fast.
And you just stand there, I guess. If that happens, you don't get your hands up or you don't tackle a screen. Guy catches a screen, you just kind of watch. Is the impression I get. This defense is horrible, and I don't understand it. They've either it's taking a long time for Fangio to really bring all this together and get these guys on the same page, or Howie Roseman has made some horrific mistakes in drafting high round players. One of the two.
Yeah, no doubt. We talked about that a lot in the open. Les, I view you as a pragmatic and sensible guy. I'd like you to talk me off the ledge on something, or let me know if
or push him off the edge.
Or push me off, exactly. So I'll take the excuse for the offense this week that there's no AJ, there's no Lane, and there's no Devontae. I'll take that.
By the way, I don't think it's an excuse. I think it's an explanation.
Explanation.
Okay, they could have been better Sunday.
Yes,
they could have had a
they
better
definitely
game
could have been
plan,
better. Yes.
But they weren't going to score 30 points with John Ross.
Okay, so an explanation. What I won't take is they've won 3 of their last 13 games. Jalen Hurts leads the league in turnovers in that time. And I think many in Philadelphia, myself included, are starting to look at this, and we're seeing similarities to the last guy that we paid big money to. And that's not a one-game sample size with no AJ Devontae.
No,
that's a bigger sample size here. And the trend is starting to be so big I can't look past it. I'm very concerned about the quarterback here. I'm very concerned about some of the things, with the way it ended with Wentz looking very similar here. Am I right to think that, or different situations? Talk me off the ledge on it.
I don't think he's playing as badly as Wentz played in 2020. Now, does that dispel all the similarities? No, it doesn't. I mean, there are similarities. Very, very, very certainly there are. It's a very different situation in a lot of ways. Hurts has way better weapons than Wentz had for one thing.
Yeah.
Most days, not Sunday, but most days. But to me, that one similarity is,
I like your defensive explanation. Is he trying to push things because the defense is so bad?
I think Carson got into that too. I think that was definitely something that started to go downhill with Carson and his turnovers.
Yeah, you pointed it out, making plays that he shouldn't be trying to make.
And by the way, in that Mahomes thing we were talking about a little while ago, that the Chiefs are winning without Mahomes playing particularly well.
Yeah. There's only 2 unbeaten teams. There's only 2 unbeaten teams right now, and they're one of them.
I think Hurts is, if you look at his stats, I think they're better than Wentz's were at the end. And I think he's not as mentally fragile as Wentz was. And I don't think he's had the physical, Wentz was an older rookie, and as the years went by and the injuries piled up, I think Wentz lost some of the physical gifts that had made him really, really good. I don't think we're at that point with Jalen Hurts, even though the running is weird sometimes.
I think we're at I don't think he's the same guy. I hear what you're saying. I think Carson fell off much more. But if you put on that early Jalen Hurts tape less, boy, he doesn't look like the same guy.
No,
he's gotten beaten up as well.
He has, but if you look at that New Orleans game, I almost think it's a matter of wanting to, being willing to try to do that, And I think on a game-to-game basis, maybe he's not willing to put himself in those situations where he's zipping around and getting blasted and,
that's fair. That's fair.
I just can't see a physical reason. I mean, he had an ankle injury a couple years ago, but I just don't. It looks to me more like I don't want to do this for the sake of the Eagles' investment in me and blah blah blah. I don't know, but there are similarities. I don't think the similarities are like, oh my God, this is the exact same thing happening again. And we are 4 games into the season too, but the one similarity I see that really does bother me is Doug Peterson and Carson Wentz ended up very much at odds.
Yeah.
And I think Doug lost his job because he was brought in to develop Carson Wentz, and Carson Wentz didn't develop, in fact, he went downhill. And that was, Doug was tied to that. And I think if Nick Sirianni can't get Jalen Hurts back where he needs to be, I don't think Nick Sirianni is going to be coach for too much longer. And they don't seem to have a good relationship. You heard another quizzical answer from Jalen, who asked about something about Nick the other day.
We have our moments. We have our moments.
What does that mean, John?
Yeah. Well, that's part of the problem with Jalen. Those are unforced errors. Like, I get it. You get tired of answering certain questions at some point. But it's easy to say, basically brush it off and say, he's doing a good job. He's doing this.
Well, it was a question about how they're gonna work together.
Yeah, how they're going to work together with the messaging. And we have our moments. And he could have said, the typical Jalen Hurts. We gotta work harder. We gotta.
Yeah.
He could have went.
Why didn't he? Why is he saying is he?
That's a legitimate question. I don't know, but I will say this. Nick tends to, and he's done this, and he could look at it as good, bad, indifferent. But he tends to fall on the sword for everybody. The most notable example would be the Seattle game last year.
Oh yeah.
Made himself look like a fool for, hey, we were trying to get a pass or whatever he said. It was just ridiculous. And he was trying to protect Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown. And AJ later took accountability for it. Good for him. But Nick protects guys. He protected Kellen Moore, I think, with the 4th and 1 call. That's me. Don't worry about Kellen Moore. That's me. I think he protected him there. I think he protects people. Jalen does not seem to be reciprocal with that. So what other avenue can he go down? Then maybe he's not thrilled with the head coach. But
I wonder if that affects. We all need Jalen to take to heart the things that he needs to correct. And I wonder if the messenger gets in the way there. I wonder if he doesn't regard things Nick says as, things he needs to pay attention to.
Yeah. Is he being pushed? I don't know if he's being pushed at all to get better.
Because Nick, you talk about Nick falling his. I mean, Nick kind of goes out of his way, especially Sunday with that turnover, to kind of take it out totally out of Jalen's. And I saw the point. I mean, one of my contentions with these turnovers is if you continually put your quarterback in situations where turnovers often occur, trying to win a game in the final minute, coming back from a 24-0 deficit, you're going to have turnovers. I mean, it's chicken and egg. But Jalen could have tucked that ball or done something there to see.
I thought there are a number of ones. If you go back to week 1 last, where Cam Jurgens seemed to snap the ball too early, that goes on Jalen Hurts. That's not his fault. I mean, hopefully you can. Yeah. But when you throw the ball across your body in the middle of the end zone, that's your fault. Yeah, that's a bad decision. I thought that was completely on Jalen Hurts. I mean, Levante David had gone by him. Does he think he evaporates? He's going to get back into play. He's going to hustle.
Right.
It's a sense. I'm not saying it's easy. So I do think that was a perfect example of Nick falling on the sword again for Jalen Hurts. That is not reciprocated. So I want to get back to that.
By the way, I don't think that's a bad thing on Nick. I think that's a good thing as a leader, to fall on the sword sometimes for your guys.
But because Les has been around Jeffrey Lurie for a long time, look, I think this goes straight to the top. And Jeffrey Lurie, if these two guys, if Jalen Hurts has a problem with the head coach, and it seems like he might, wasn't this vetted after the season last year? I mean, if you're Jeffrey Lurie,
they were going to bring Nick back. This should have been worked out. But this gets back to the collapse last season and how long, what a prolonged and painful collapse it was, and my puzzlement over why Howie or Jeffrey couldn't get these people together in a room and get these things worked out even during that, let alone after that. Certainly after that, I just don't. There's a lot here I don't understand. I mean, that was one of my questions on social media during this game Sunday was, Jeffrey Lurie's sitting there watching his team fall behind 24-0 midway through the second quarter. What is he thinking? we're I can't imagine it's anything good. And I just wonder where we're going with all this. It's just it's not.
Well,
it is. They're
Zander,
2-2 after 4 games. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but and they're not
the
going to
schedule lightens up. The schedule lightens up.
Yeah,
but I will say this, and you know this, Les. In the Eagles bubble, they got the big thing, and Nick's not stopped talking about it since he got here. It's connect, compete, accountability, football IQ, and fundamentals. That's his 5 core values as a head coach, right? Unfortunately, I know those by heart because I've heard them so much. So this week, over the past week, connection. You got Darius Slay on Micah Parsons' podcast.
Yes.
With talking about a struggling teammate who's not playing well. Competition. Their idea of competing with the Bucs was, rolling over like a puppy and getting their belly pet. Accountability. You got Brandon Graham over on WIP saying he had to remind teammates that basically they have to remain accountable and they have to step up. Football IQ evidently means untimely penalties, pre-snap penalties, constant, Isaiah Rodgers not knowing the rules.
Into your punt returner.
Exactly. Not knowing the rules. Fundamentals, 15 missed tackles. How do you survive that? Those are your 5 quarters.
Right now, you don't. Right now, you don't survive it. I mean, I think if they're a 7-10 team and miss the playoffs, there's no way you survive it. Or even if they're an 8-9 team and miss the playoffs. If they're a 9-8 team and miss the playoffs, I'd fire him. Yikes. There's too much talent here. I'm sorry. There's too much talent here for this team to be this. They're like Nick. I've said this before, and you've probably heard me say it before. The team reflects its coach. It's undisciplined. It's up and down, inconsistent. Nick, after that New Orleans game, was going on and on about life lessons and stuff.
Adversity,
he won a game and he was like, over the moon. It was like they'd won the Super Bowl or something. The team is like the coach.
Yeah,
I'm stuck right now on the Jalen Hurts thing, Les, because you brought something up, and we talk about we're only in week 4, and I get it. You can't sound the alarms in week 4 in any football season, but this problem didn't just start now. In the last 13 games, I'm going to give you real quick some stats. In the last 11 games, Jalen Hurts is 3-8. He's got 10 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. I don't even have the fumbles in front of me. He's taken 23 sacks and he's completed 64% of his passes. If I look back at Carson Wentz in 2020, he had Travis Fulgham and Jalen Reagor.
Yeah.
I was told last week, that's the all-encompassing excuse for Jalen Hurts is that he's missing his top 2 guys. Well, I think Dallas Goedert and Saquon Barkley might be better than who Wentz was working with in 2020.
But they didn't throw it to Barkley at all.
No, they didn't.
But I'm wondering that game. I thought
maybe Jalen isn't as bad as Wentz. He just has way better talent in the last 11 games. I mean, AJ Brown wasn't out for the last.
I think Jalen could have used Travis Fulgham in that game last week. I think that would have been helpful.
He could have, but boy, I'm stuck on wondering if we got a lot of problems here that aren't so easy to fix.
That's quite, Jalen's vision and his comfort level. Jalen has to have an extreme comfort level with these receivers, and that gets in the way, I think. I think he doesn't want to throw the ball to guys that are open that he doesn't have
he doesn't trust.
Yeah, and he's got to get over that. I mean, you can't. Jahan Dotson, I don't know if he's any good or not. They did certainly get him for a bargain price, but I don't think Jalen wants to throw him the ball. And you can't trade for a guy and then have the quarterback not want to throw him the ball. But my other point was going to be, and it's a little bit off of your Jalen Hurts thing, was going into that game, I thought we would see Barkley as a receiver. Because I knew they'd load the box to stop the run. I thought we would see Kenny Gainwell catching passes. I thought they might put Shipley, flank him out. He's somebody that Hurts has thrown the pass to in training camp. He's not John Ross or something. They played
By the
Shipley
way,
for
they put Will Shipley out there for the first play. I don't
first
know if you
snap.
noticed.
Yeah, first snap,
Les,
and that was
and
it.
that was it. It's like what are
What
you?
did he do on that first snap? He must have really screwed up.
Yeah,
It just seems like there's so much common sense missing, Les. Like you just said, I mean, you're missing your two best receivers. You would think they would know, okay, they're going to stack the box. Let's give them some different looks with our other playmakers. They didn't do any of that.
No, they threw the ball to the outside to guys who aren't very good.
Yeah, they tried to turn them into AJ and Devontae for the day, and that obviously was a losing recipe.
Speaking of common sense, before we lose you, Les, I got to talk about this defense. I mean, you talk about common sense. You mentioned New Orleans. Like, New Orleans came into that game 2-0, scoring 45.5 points a game.
Yep.
They run play action, 12 personnel, old school Kubiak Shanahan, and they're not going to change because you don't change when you're having success. So I thought they had this brilliant game plan. Kudos to Vic. It worked perfectly, and they won a game. Now, here's my problem. You go into Tampa. For those that don't know, Tampa was 2-0. Then they got embarrassed at home by Denver.
Yes.
And the Eagles came in. Yeah. The Eagles came in saying, well, Baker Mayfield holds the ball more than most people. And they're coming in. There's no curveballs. There's not going to be any curveballs coming up that kind of performance. And all of a sudden, the Bucs show, it's all quick passing game. No adjustments. We asked Vic about this ad nauseum. He's like, I tried doing play. And
and what did that mean, John? Vic talked Tuesday, and it was because of the bye and everything. There's no players around to check this, but he basically said right away he told guys to tighten it up.
Yes, yeah.
Well, what the hell happened? Because they didn't. Why didn't he? I mean, I'd love to be able to stand in front of Darius Slay and say, you know what? Hey, your coordinator says that right away he told you guys to play tighter on these guys. What happened? They didn't. It was a disaster. It almost seems to me, John, like this. I keep bringing up emotion again. In New Orleans, they had a good game plan. They had some initial success, and guys really got, fired up about it and were rallying to the ball and were flying around, and suddenly they're a good defense. And in this game, the opposite happens. The opponent does something they don't expect. They give up a touchdown on the first possession, and it's like everybody's sort of like, curled up in a ball. A lot of that tackling, I'm not an X and O guy, and I'm not, I never played at any level, but one-on-one tackling in space is really hard. Every time, first of all, because of the coverages, every receiver was wide open. So everybody who catches the ball is catching it with a full head of steam. And there's one guy trying to tackle this guy. There's nobody else. I brought up in a thing I wrote for PHLY, the play where Zach Bond tipped the ball. You remember that? It was a short pass early in the game. He bats the ball. It bloops up in the air, comes down in the receiver's hand. The receiver makes the one guy who's covering him miss and goes like 20 yards down the side. Nobody, he gave them extra time to get over there. And everybody was just sort of standing there like, wonder what'll happen now. I just don't see, there's something really wrong, in here.
I think it's, our buddy, I have tremendous respect for Vic Fangio. Our buddy Paul Domowitch maybe has more respect than anybody. He's known Vic since 84.
84, yeah.
I think he's one of the best defense. I think he's going in the Hall of Fame. That's how much respect I have for Vic Fangio as a coordinator. But I think the league is caught up to his scheme, Les. It happens all the time. We saw it with Tony Dungy, and everybody copies what Tony Dungy's doing. And then it was Pete Carroll, and everybody copies what Seattle's doing. And they have these cycles. Yeah. Everybody copied Vic's defense, and now everybody's used to it. They figured out the holes, and you got to go to the next cycle.
Yeah.
I think that's where we are with this defense.
Boy, I hope you're wrong, but there are some. Jimmy Kempski came up with a good the end of last season when they hired Vic. He had a stat about the defenses that were using Vic's scheme last year, and none of them. There were no top 10 defenses using the Fangio scheme, which was striking to me, because it is such a revered thing throughout the league.
I don't think Vic has ever won any either. Has he? Has he ever won? He's never been a Super Bowl. He's never been a part of a Super Bowl team. I mean, Hall of Fame, John? I don't know. I don't know about that.
Well, they're letting coordinators in now, but and his reputation is such that I think
it is a great reputation. There's no doubt
he's got a good
it.
reputation. I just wonder if it's a little bit inflated,
Well, yeah,
but they're going to have to do something different. They can't just not be a functional defense anytime they're in nickel. I mean, that doesn't work. And that's what it's been, really. That first game in Brazil was kind of weird. They played real well in the red zone, so they didn't give up a lot of points. And Green Bay has struggled a little bit offensively, more than people thought they would, I think. The next game, the Atlanta game, was horrendous, and the fact that the Eagles had the ball the whole game and kept not scoring points with it sort of covered up for the defense, which gave up 22 points in 24 minutes of Falcons possession time. Figure that out over if you've got like 35 minutes of possession time, how many points that would be. And then they had the great New Orleans game. Then they had this game. I mean, they've played well once, in 4 games. And
I think you're right. They can't play nickel. So, I mean, and most teams play 11 personnel. There are only a few teams that play like New Orleans plays. So sometimes styles make bites. And until they figure out the nickel, they're in trouble. They're in trouble because the vast majority of teams are going to play that. They're not going to play the style that the Saints play. I was thinking about personnel and the bye week, Les, and it's at Les Bowen. Make sure you follow Les on the X platform. You can read him at PHLY, doing a tremendous job for those guys. I look at it and say, what can you do personnel wise? Offensively, you just got to wait for guys to get healthy. Everything's pretty much entrenched. Defensively, sounded like he's about to pull the trigger on Cooper DeJean. Maybe that helps a little bit.
A good thing,
yeah. Other than that, linebacker.
Well, Sidney Brown at some point, but that's probably 3 weeks or so away.
But even Sidney, who's he replacing?
Maybe C.J. Gardner-Johnson. The way things are going.
Yeah. Are we at that point where we have to say that's where I was actually going? Where we have to say. And we have to see how healthy Sidney, by the way, looks great. He looks like he could have played in August, but they're obviously torn ACL needs a certain amount of time to heal. Are we at that point where we say, hey, maybe let's take a look at Jeremiah Trotter Jr. for Nakobe Dean or Sidney Brown for CJ Gardner-Johnson? Are we at that point?
I would, but I really think you need an edge rusher as much as you need anything. I don't care.
Well, they don't have options at edge rusher. I guess Alex Hunt. I guess
if you had a trade, if you had any way to trade for one, I don't guess that's a real viable option at this point. But
nobody tends to give up good edge rushers. I found that.
I know.
You could get a Robert Quinn type.
Yeah, that's a waste of time. That's a big hole to me. This whole thing about the defensive line can't be expected to do anything, because the quarterback gets the ball out. They've got to do better than this. They've got to. Baker Mayfield was just playing pitch and catch all day Sunday with nobody in his face, no hands up, no nothing, and they can't do that, and they can't play that far off of the receivers. And I don't understand it.
Well, that seems like an easy fix, but evidently it's not.
Apparently
not. That seems like the easiest fix in the world to me, Les. Maybe I'm missing something. You tell people, hey, got to get tighter.
Maybe he knows that his pass rush won't get home, and they'll give up long bombs every play if they get tighter. I don't know. but
Les,
it's not working like this. I mean, you can't
yeah.
you can't continue like this defensively.
Les, last question for me. At what point does Howie Roseman get brought into this as part of the blame? And I'm looking at some of the offseason acquisitions. We talk about how bad this defense has looked. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, second most missed tackles in the NFL right now at 8, most touchdowns allowed in coverage at 3. Bryce Huff has 3 total pressures, 0 sacks or quarterback hits in 71 pass rush attempts. Jahan Dotson is offensive side, but not a good trade for him so far through 4 games. Devin White, I'm not going to criticize him for $3.5 million, but I will criticize the lack of assets invested in the position. The defensive draft picks, there's a lot of and hope in those guys that aren't panning out right now.
The draft picks are really crucial to me because I really think unless that works out, they are really screwed. I mean,
the Georgia puppies, Les, that's what I'm calling them. The Georgia puppies right now.
You can't miss out on top 15, first round draft picks year after year and have a good defense. I mean, that's Jalen Carter. He certainly has the talent to be a disruptor and a force. I listen to the guy talk and I don't know, you have to have the motor and the want to do these things. Jordan Davis, I don't see it. Nakobe Dean, a lot of people like Nakobe Dean because he flies around out there sometimes, but he flies around and misses. He was horrendous. I mean, his tackling was just at ground zero of that whole debacle Sunday. He can't take good angles. He mistimes things. He can't cover anybody, which is a huge problem for them at linebacker. They've made some bad decisions. Certainly Howie is in the discussion for me as to why this doesn't work. It's Howie gets a lot of kudos around the league because they've been to the Super Bowl twice, and with different coaches but everything seems to blow up with Howie after a couple of years. And then he has to do some Houdini thing where he works his way out of it and gets a good team again. And I don't know. I know Jeffrey is never going to fire Howie. But
Julian's coming down though. That's your
that
window.
will be the day when it happens. I really feel that. I mean, I don't know their relationship, but
it's just natural for somebody to want their own people. That's how I look at it. And for those who want, I think Howie is a top 5 NFL GM. So I be careful what you wish for.
Oh yeah.
You got to look at the end game. Like, who are you going to replace him with? That's my first assessment, and it's going to be very difficult. That doesn't mean he's perfect. He makes mistakes all the time. You have this other group that thinks he's above reproach.
Right.
It's always somewhere in between. But I do think overall, the large sample size, and part of it is the large sample size. He's got an opportunity to learn and make mistakes and get better. And most GMs don't, Les.
It's true.
They're like, make a couple mistakes and they're out the door. So,
but I would like to see some consistency and some, they keep trying to find a coach like Andy Reid who can be here for 10, 15 years, and a program builder. And they've failed miserably at finding those sorts of people. They really, there aren't many of them for one thing.
No, there aren't many. There aren't many. But that's why you're right about that, though, in the fact that they're always trying to find the guy who's going to be here for 10, 15 years. The reality is they're not going to be here. So why not bring in a Bill Belichick? Like people say, well, Bill's 72.
I think they won't control too much. I don't think they would like Bill. They like to have the final say.
Well, that's a fair
point. And I maintain, after watching New England the last few years,
but in this instance, it would be no personnel power, just to be the coach,
just to stop people from doing stupid crap all the time. Yeah, I can kind of see that.
Hold somebody accountable for something. Les, thanks for joining today, man. Great insight. As always, I love getting you on. You're an opinionated guy, and I think all your opinions are very good. So thank you for doing it, man. I will talk to you again soon. All right, Les?
Thanks, Les.
All right, good stuff. There's Les Bowen joining us on Birds 365. Really good stuff from Les. Always brings a great voice to the conversation, great opinion, great analysis on everything. So Really good to get him. I thought we had some great conversation today, John, with this team. I know it's early, and I know it's the bye week, and you start to analyze your football team at the bye week. And as John pointed out, it's very early. It's harder to analyze, when you have a small sample size, especially with AJ being out. But it does tie into a lot of stuff last year too, John. It's not just been this year. Some of these problems existed last year.
No,
and
yeah,
they're continuing. And
no doubt
I
about
thought
it.
we analyzed it pretty well. I do have a big super chat I want to get to, but just your thought on what I just said.
Yeah, no doubt. It's getting bigger. Like we talk about the small sample size this year, but if you go back to last year, it's what, 3-10? That's a pretty big sample size. They've been one of the worst teams in football. How does that happen? How do you go from the greatest stretch in a 91-year history to 3-10 and being one of the worst teams in football? They're still trying to figure that out. I don't think anybody knows. I think that's part of the problem.
You can't fix a problem if you don't know what it is.
Yeah. And I firmly, everybody's got their thoughts. I have my thoughts. I think they crushed under the weight of these ridiculous expectations. And that's, they deserve some, at least some part of that, and building up the assumption that they're better than everybody else. They're not. They're not. Maybe, Occam's razor applies. Simplest explanation is usually the right one. Maybe they're not better than everybody else. And they're like everybody else in this league. Nip and tuck. And if you play well, you'll win by a score. And if you play poorly, you'll lose. Maybe they're mediocre. Dare I bring that word up?
Tough realization there for Eagles fans. I thought Les brought some good points. Boy, I'm still stuck on that Jalen Hurts thing. I mean,
I'm not going to compare Jalen to Carson. I don't
I'm
like
not either.
Comparison.
But we talk about how Les said it. Jalen hasn't regressed to that point. Imagine if Jalen had the weapons Carson had.
What? Dan Orlovsky put up a clip about him making wrong reads. That's my biggest concern with Jalen Hurts.
Well, you watch the all 22. There's a lot of dudes left open, and I don't like to always use that because you don't know how the
I don't like that. Albert Breer said something about because I'm not a film guy like Les. I don't our job is to ask questions of the coaches and the players and get explanations, not make assumptions on film, because we don't know the end game. We don't know what they're trying to accomplish. We don't know where the read is. So our job is to get access and use the access, as Albert explained, to get the answers, not make all-encompassing judgments that we don't have the information on. Our job is to get that information. But so there's plenty of film people out there, and I would just say, find somebody you like and trust who you trust. But, guys like Dan who know what he's doing, that's one of the guys I would trust more than certain other people. Look, I respect anybody who's trying to learn the game and all that kind of stuff. But if you don't know, you don't know. Dan knows. So he's kind of a guy I trust. And he's certainly a quarterback himself. Now, people say, well, he stunk. All right. Well, there aren't a lot of people that make the NFL. So even if you're a third string quarterback in the NFL, but my point in all this, he was showing some very simple concepts, some very simple routes. And I'll retweet it right now. I just put it
I'm going
up.
to go and watch it. So please do retweet
it. So in the case of, these are simple things that quarterbacks are taught to do, and he's not doing them. And that is a bigger concern for me than he also brought up the Dallas Goedert drop. He showed a clip of that. Look, that's not on the quarterback. That's a good read. And he got a good player and he dropped the football, and everybody talks about 3 consecutive 3-and-outs. Guess what? If Dallas Goedert makes a simple play, you don't have 3 consecutive 3-and-outs, but there's plenty of other bad stuff in there. And Dan's a guy who knows. So that's the kind of stuff that concerns me.